Super. So welcome everyone. It's lovely to see you all. Lovely to see some familiar faces and lovely to see some new faces too. So welcome. I also am really delighted that I think this is the first time this has happened in one of my classes, and I'm very excited about this, that as well as having people who are experiencing focal dystonia, we actually have several brain spotting therapists who are joining us. Other than the team, I'm going to introduce you to the team in a moment, but we actually have some other brain spotting therapists who have started to become very interested in this way of working, this methodology. So all of you, all the brain spotting people, I'm really delighted that you are here, and I hope that you find this an interesting way of approaching particularly two things: somatization in the body, but also flow, and how to connect into what is a very natural state, which is our flow state. Okay, so welcome. The format for today is I'm going to introduce the team of brain spotting therapists that I work closely with and who work closely with this method. Then, so I have my notes here if I'm looking down. Then I want to give you some background and a deeper understanding of this exercise, which is the zero state. So that's what we're going to be really focusing on today, is the zero state. And I want to give you some background to it. It looks sort of like quite a simple exercise, but it has a tremendous depth as to where this comes from. And I really wanted to give you that context. Then I'm going to guide you through the exercise, and then we'll have time at the end for any feedback and questions around it. Okay. So I would like to welcome you first to our lovely team. So there's I reached a point a while back where I really just didn't have room in my diary to be able to support all the people who were contacting me, and started to look for actually a group of very special therapists to work with me and support me in this work. They're all therapists that I've personally invited to join me, and I've personally invited them for a number of reasons. One, that they're brain spotting therapists and very, very skilled brain spotting therapists, but also because of their depth as human beings and their own personal experience, their own personal experience through life and their own personal growth, as well as their professional experience, and really being able to understand the frame that I'm working with, the method that I'm working with, in which we do use brain spotting as a tool, but it goes far beyond that. So I'm gonna, if it's okay with each of you, I'm gonna call your names out in the order that I have you on my screen, and if you would just say a quick hello. So David.
Hello everyone, David Susevich here, Ohio Valley Hypnosis in Ohio in the US here. Professional musician for over 40 years, multiple instruments, singer as well. I had focal dystonia in my first instrument, clarinet, and I had it probably in the late 80s is when it showed up, and I've tried pretty much everything, and came close over about a 35 year period to resolving it, but there was always something there. And then I found Ruth a few years ago, and I was where a lot of you are. I took sessions with her, I resolved it in the sessions with her, and as you can see, I'm also a hypnotist as well. I was using hypnosis before I got to working with Ruth, and I kind of now exclusively use brain spotting for treating FD, and I'm really pleased and proud and humbled to be able to work with Ruth and to work with you all, and being able to assist whoever comes to my door to resolve this and have get the resolution and the peace and getting my full musical abilities back. So thank you, Ruth, for everything and bringing us all together. And the book has made our lives a lot easier. It's helped spread the method or the system around a little bit easier, and just so glad you're here and looking forward to if I can be of service to being a part of your journey, if I can help. So thanks.
Thanks, David. Carlos.
Thanks, Ruth. Hi, everyone. I'm Carlos Vila from Spain. Although I've lived in the US for many years, I'm a therapist. I've been a therapist for around 10, 11 years now, but this wasn't always like that. I used to be a film director, quite a successful film director in Spain, and when I worked in the US. And I've worked especially many years with actors, helping actors in their emotional expression, and also as a therapist, most of my clients are actors, TV hosts, musicians, dancers, singers. So I've been quite for a long time working with the arts, and today is the first day I join in the masterclass with Ruth. So I'll just kind of let myself flow and see where it goes. And I'm glad to be here with you. Thanks for being there too.
Thank you. Charles.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Roberts. I currently live in Louisiana in the United States and go between here and Ohio a lot. That's my former home. But I'm a therapist. My first career was as a professional trombonist. So I used to say, like I've heard Ruth say, there's just nothing better than sitting with a group of musicians playing chamber music and to go into that place of just where you just feel so connected and present with each other and with the music. That's what I used to say. I still kind of believe that, but this work is a close second. Just to be able to do this work of Brainspotting and to do this work that Ruth is doing and to be a part of this team is really close to that. There's just something really special about being present with myself and with other human beings as we all heal. So just feel really great to be here today, and really grateful to be a part of this beautiful team, and looking forward to learning today.
Thank you, Charles. Alan, did I see, has Alan joined us? You there, Alan? Okay, I think Alan might be having some connectivity problems, right?
Yeah, he said he was in the country and he wasn't sure.
Yeah,
I'll look out for him and send him.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So let me explain some of the background. All right. Now, some of this is already explained in the book, but I want to go a little bit deeper. All right. And let us think of ourselves as being made up of many parts. Okay, we're all made up of lots of parts of ourselves, and we know that. We know that we have our parts that are more serious, our parts that are more playful, our parts that are great comedians, our parts that are more worrying. So we're all made up of lots of different parts of ourselves. Ideally, all those parts would form a cohesive whole, or would be formed around a cohesive whole. They would have a natural flow between one part and the other, depending on the moment. You know, so there are moments that require us to feel more sort of sensible and responsible, and there are other moments that require us to be light and playful. And we would naturally be able to flow between one part to the other, and they're centered around a kind of central part of ourselves. Okay, now as a result of those four groups that of circumstances that I talk about in the book, so that's attachment and early childhood attunement issues, adverse events, having been educated within the oppression model, and injuries, what happens is those parts become fragmented. Okay, and even more importantly, for many of us, what happens is some parts become hidden or excluded or lost, and other parts who are more defensive or protective parts start to take central stage. What that means for us is that there is a, you know, we can think of it in this sort of very metaphorical way in terms of parts, but we can also think of it in terms of our nervous system, that the nervous system also starts to become fragmented. And so that it's not working as a whole. You know, and one of the most clear ways that we see that is the corpus callosum, which is the part right in the center of the brain that connects the two hemispheres. That actually becomes thinner, and it becomes less capable. There are less connections as a result of any one of those four experiences. So what does that mean? That means that literally one side of the brain becomes disconnected from the other. Whereas people who have not had those experiences, there is a very clear connection, very strong connection between each side of the brain. That's why for most people, the focal dystonia tends to be asymmetrical and just on one side of the body. And there is a large degree of asymmetry that accompanies the focal dystonia. So when this defensive or protective part takes central stage, now that's an extraordinarily wise survival strategy for our nervous system to do. It's not wrong that it did that. It's completely right that it did that, but it does have some knock-on effects for us in our lives. Other than just the disconnections, it also has knock-on effects around rigidity, the inability to flow fluidly between one state and another, between one emotion and another. There's often a degree of seriousness that happens as a result of that. And those parts are the parts that I talk about, or those aspects that I talk about in terms of the mental and emotional aspect of the focal dystonia, where I talk about that kind of trying harder, being in a hurry, needing to get results, the competitivity, compressing time, all those different aspects that we find being highly critical, perfectionistic. That is normally one of our protective parts as a result of a protective part taking central stage, because basically it started to do a job that it's actually not designed to do and not really very good at doing. Okay, I'm really just going over this in a very kind of overview way, just so that we make the most of the time today. The next book that I'm partway through writing is completely dedicated to all of this, because what happens is those defensive parts, because they're doing such a good job at keeping us safe, and because from their experience the threat is still here in the here and now, they start to become very rigidly my identity of I. Okay, and this is really critical to what we're doing with the zero state exercise. One of the most frequent comments or ways that I hear people describing it is they go, I have been doing the zero state exercise, or in a particular circumstance, I connected to the zero state exercise. Now that I that they're talking from is not their central part. It's not their central identity. It's one of these defensive parts that has been obliged to take central stage. Okay, now what I want, so as I say, I'm talking quite superficially or in a very kind of general way about this right now, but actually as my idea for my next book is that as I can actually take you through a very experiential journey of this, then I think that will help you really understand and really feel the fragmentation and feel the stress and the constant survival movement that is happening as a result of one of those, of having the wrong part in the center. And I'm not saying wrong that it's wrong, but I mean just it's not the central part. So it's taking up a place that's actually very stressful for it to be in. All right, now that doesn't mean that part is not beautiful and amazing and has something really wise to offer us, but we're asking it to do something that it's really not designed to do. Okay, so what So part of our resolution around the focal dystonia, we think about the fragmentation. So the reason I'm talking about the parts is because that's about a fragmentation, and the body is fragmented within focal dystonia. As a result of that, the body is just a reflection of what's happening in the nervous system in terms of this fragmentation. And it's also a reflection of how we've lost connection with certain parts of ourselves. Okay. And it's that in combination with what I talk about in the book of the survival, being the body being in the survival movement, and these being physiological survival movements within the body. Okay, be that the neck being turned in cervical dystonia, the fingers being hypercontracted or hyperextended in terms of hand dystonia, the pulling back, or the tongue coming up to the roof of the mouth. And the constriction that sometimes is happening here in terms of the embouchure dystonia, the foot becoming weak and turning in terms of the foot dystonia. Okay, you know, and I've worked with people who have had dystonia in their knees, in other areas of the body as well, but these are the most common things that we see. So there's survival movements in the body, but there's also this aspect of this fragmentation that's happening as well within the nervous system. So what we want to be able to do is come back to the central self, and then from there enable all our parts to become cohesively to be able to be connected around that. And that's what the zero state exercise and the kindness state exercise do. It's not an exercise that you're doing over here. It actually starts to become your central identity. And I think that's one of my key reasons for wanting to teach this class was that that's a part that's actually very difficult for us to often grasp. That this becomes our central identity, and the I who you think you are is a protective part of you that's keeping you safe. And sometimes it can find it very difficult to let go of that because it really believes that the world is unsafe. I mean, I'm talking metaphorically, it's happening often at a completely subconscious level, but it has difficulty letting go of being in the center. Sometimes, you know, we had an incident this week with somebody. Sometimes, you know, people start with this process and they go, no, I just don't want to go there. You know, this is too much for me. And we can work with this process in a really gentle way so it never is too much. But sometimes that reaction, that defensive reaction is very strong, either to the process as a whole or to just going, oh no, I'm kind of paying lip service to that part of the process. I'm going to keep it over there. And you know, part of when I talk about the guest house at the beginning of the book, and I say we'll want to welcome in all of our parts and really get to know ourselves. We want to come back and really observe all of those responses in ourselves. And rather than going, I'm right to have that response, this is the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, what we do is we actually start to hold ourselves with more softness, from a more witness place where we can go, isn't that interesting that I do that? Let me feel into that. Let me understand more about that. So if we go right back to the beginning of the process, so I start the process with the attunement exercise, because that's about developing the skill to be able to really come back to yourself and observe yourself and everything that's going on just the way it is. No judgments. No, it should be like this, it should be like that. I've got to get rid of this tension. Oh, that part of my body feels fantastic. The other part of my body, I don't like that. Make it go away. Make the dystonia go away. Make the tensions go away. Make the twitches go away. We're not doing any of that. We're going, let's welcome everything in and let me start to become really self-aware, really know myself so that I can start to see, you know, where the imbalances are, where the fragmentation is, which parts are pushing other parts away. You know, which are my defensive parts that are going, well, I don't want to look at that because I need to defend what's keeping me safe or what kept me safe, but is probably not keeping me safe any longer. And we want to do that with gentleness and with care and with sensitivity. Okay. So that's our attunement part. Then we come into this 0 state, which is where we really start to come back into our center and our central self. And the deeper we can enable ourselves to just drop into that, and the more familiar we can become to it, that gives us a really great place to then to look at everything else from, and to become aware of all of our activations and all the ways that we are in survival mode. And then we come to our kindness exercise, which, as well as healing all the centers of the brain where those experiences are held, it's also a very central prism and a different way from which we can look at ourselves and we can hold ourselves to. Okay, so just to give you the kind of the frame around that, and then from there is where we can then begin our healing. Okay, now some people already notice that a lot of healing happens just from those first 3 exercises, and that's wonderful too, but really their purpose is to give us a place from which we can heal, a really central place from which we can heal. Does anybody have any questions on any of that before I continue? Elizabeth, just take yourself off mute for a moment.
Hello, I'm Lisbeth from Belgium. I'm just brand new Brainspotter. For 2 months or so, I did phase 2 with Mark in UK, and you presented your book, which I'm reading. But I have a question. When you say they have to do all these exercises before the real healing can start, does that mean that you're not starting with brain spotting before they are in these exercises?
Okay, that's a good question. So let's think about brain spotting as that it's a tool, and it's a tool that is most effective when it's used within a frame. Okay, and I talked about, I'm going to just say this very briefly, because the last video I put on my YouTube and on the Facebook talked a little bit more detail about this. So the frame within which we use brain spotting, there's 2 parts of that frame. One is attunement. And that attunement is, if you're a therapist and you're working with a client, that's your attunement to that client. Okay. If you're a client, the attunement is the therapist to you, but it's also your attunement to yourself. And so the more attuned you are to the yourself, the more effective the brain spotting tool can be, the more skillfully we can use it. Okay, and a lot of I give you, lots of exercises in the book where you're self-spotting, and again, the more attuned you are to yourself as you do that, then the more effective those exercises will be. So that's why I really suggest you really spend this time learning how to become skilled at being attuned to yourself again. Then, once we start going into the 0 state, we do find the brain spot for that. And the brain spot for that, it's technically, if we were going to talk for those of you who are brain spotting therapists, that's technically an expansion brain spot. For the rest of you, don't worry about that. That's just a technical thing for my lovely brain spotting colleagues. It's an expansion brain spot. And so as we brain spot the 0 state, what we're doing is we're enabling that to the neural networks for that state. We're accelerating the development and the strengthening of that neural network. Okay. And likewise, when we do the kindness state, we also brain spot that kindness state with an expansion brain spot. All right. So and just in doing that, the healing is already beginning. Now, even though we're not kind of doing any active healing there, the healing is already beginning. And that becomes the place from which, as you start then to, once you'll get to part 3 of the book, that's when you'll see how then we can use those brain spots in order to, along with, you know, our resource brain spots and our activation brain spots. You can see I provide a frame there within which, so we've got our attunement frame, but then we've also got our therapeutic frame. So we have so this process is a therapeutic model. It's a therapeutic frame within which we use the tool of brain spotting, and you know, the setups of how we might do that are all given in a very step-by-step manner within the book.
And do you have a general time frame? I know it's every person is different, but is there somewhere a link to make?
Everyone's completely unique in their timing with it. Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. So some of you already know this exercise because you've already been working with it. Okay. For others of you, this will be the first time that you've done the exercise. All right. For everybody, I'm going to guide you through in it, and it's very much about connecting into the physical body and just feeling into the sensations. It's like an attunement into very specific areas of the physical body. Okay, so for everybody, you're just going to follow as far as you can go. Some of you will find this really easy, and you'll go right through the whole process, right to the end, and it will feel very easy. For others of you, that won't be the case, and you might just be able to connect to that very first aspect that I talk about and not be able to connect to anything else. That's all fine. So I'm just going to really encourage each of you just to be really present with where you're at and what you're able to connect to, and just kind of from a really self-supportive way to go, that's where I am today, and that's perfect, because today I'm perfect too. Okay, and this experience is exactly what it needs to be. Okay, so I'm just going to encourage you all just to close your eyes for a moment and just start connecting inwards into your physical body. And you will find that there are some areas in your body that feel more easy to access, feel more stable, comfortable, comforting. And just be aware of where they are, and just be aware of how they feel. And when you're ready, I would just like you to become aware of the bones that form your hip bowl. So at the back, you have the triangle that makes up the sacrum. And if you want to, you can even put your hands on this area just to feel it from the outside as well. And then out of the sacrum, the bones come across the back of the hips, round the side, and they start to come forwards towards the front of the body. And just as best you can, come feeling into the physical sensation of these bones. Just feeling the structure. Allow it to be really easy. And trust that whatever you feel is just right for right now. And if you're able to, you can feel this structure as like a bowl that forms your hips. And maybe you can even start to feel inwards into the inner part of that bowl, into what fills the bowl. And just allow your attention, your felt sense, to start moving inwards into the center, as far as your attention can go. Take all the time that you wish with this. And for those of you who reach a point where you can really feel the whole of this area, then you might start to become aware that there's also a central space that runs right up your body, right through your body, from top to bottom, from bottom to top. It's the space that's neither the left side of your body nor the right. It's the space in between. And so whenever you're ready, if you become ready, just also at the same time as feeling the whole of the pelvic bowl area, start to become aware of the felt sense of this central space. That's it. Just making it very simple, very easy experience. Without expectations, nothing big needs to happen. It's about the simplicity that we find here. The simplicity that we find through connecting into the physical sensations, just the way they are. Letting go of our need to analyze, understand, or interpret or label. It's the direct experience of the physical sensation. That's it. And just staying here all the time that you desire. And when you feel complete, just opening your eyes and coming back to me. Okay. So I'm really interested, first off, in hearing your feedback as to what that feels like, your experience of that exercise.
Ruth, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you, John, yeah.
I don't know where the hand mechanism is on my little machine here.
Okay.
This might seem a really daft thing to say, but when you talk about that kind of central space, I imagine it as a very straight space like this. And yet, what I'm very aware of when I'm kind of getting in tune with the body is the actual curvature of the spine.
Okay.
And I'm kind of, I have a bit of a struggle with that somehow. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody else has that same feeling about it, but that's one of the things that I think is kind of a little bit in the way of me, fully grasping the exercise.
Yeah. Okay. It's a really good question, John, and I think there are a lot of people have similar experiences, and then other experiences. around that, you know, kind of there are variations on that experience. So I'm going to talk around that, if that's okay with you. I'm going to take it a little bit broader than just your direct question around it. Oftentimes, if we've become disconnected to the body, it's actually quite difficult to feel what's going on. And so many people, when they start to work with these exercises, they go, I need to sort of visualize it first. And I create a visual image, and then through that visual image, I start to connect to the body. And I think that's a really useful and practical tool for many people. And it's a really great way of coming back to the body. But there does come a point where we actually do start to really feel what's there, not just our image of it. And as we feel what's there, that's where we want to follow. We really want to get inside the direct experience of the felt sense of the body, whatever's there. Okay, whatever that is. All right. So, so I think that's the first thing that I'd pull out of what you're sharing there, John. And it sounds like you're capable of both parts, of visualizing, but also of actually really feeling the natural curvature that is there in the spine. And so allow yourself to feel into that. And what you may find that comes from that is that you're aware of, it's almost like, these are really difficult things to describe because they're such metaphorical experiences. We're in the metaphorical part of the brain in these exercises. So sometimes the logic escapes us, but it's almost like we feel within all of that there's a space. It's not really quite the physical body of the muscles and the bones. There's actually a space within all of that. And that's what eventually we connect to, is that sense of space that's there. Okay, which is sort of beyond the physical. We don't need to force that. We don't need to try and imagine what it's like. Eventually, we actually just become aware of it. We go, oh, okay, there it is. That's what it feels like. All right. Now, for some people, once they start to connect to that space, it's not in the middle. They go, oof, I feel that it's over to one side, or I feel it's over to the other side, or I feel that it's diagonal, or I feel that it suddenly does this and jumps to one side and then comes back to the center again. All right. Now, we want to be aware of all of those things. All right. And the more we become aware of them, and the more we continue to brain spot, eventually we notice that it starts to regulate itself and it starts to become central. Okay, just by being aware of where it is and how it is, that in itself, since the brain seems to somehow realize that that's not quite right, and it rectifies it on its own. Okay. As I always say with these, you know, sometimes we're working with very, very early experiences. There's a lot of brain development, physiological brain development that's happened as a result of those experiences. And sometimes for some people that we don't quite get there on our own, and we start to realize this has got a bit stuck somehow, or I can't really connect with what's Ruth describing. You know, if that happens, don't keep fighting through that. That's why there's, you know, that's why I'm here and my lovely team is here, because sometimes actually we just need some accompaniment with that in order to be able to really enable our brain, to our nervous system, to resolve some of these issues. Okay. Did I answer your question, John?
It does. I mean, what I've learned so far is just not to force things,
yeah,
and just accept that it will come.
Yes.
And
yeah.
and I can't actually anticipate the way in which it will come either.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy with the process, and I believe.
Okay. Okay.
I believe I'll get there with it. So.
You will, and thank you so much for sharing it in that way, John. That's it, spot on. Yeah, thank you. So, Jeff.
Hi,
Jeff.
I wanted to share a little bit of my experience here today and that as I find, the balance or the centroid, in the pelvic area, the central space, and I've been obviously working on this. Well, not obviously, but I've been working on it for, going on 12 weeks now. So I can get there fairly easily. And today it was very invigorating and calming, and just like feel that energy there. And then if I lose focus, then my brain goes to something I think I should be doing, or something that's a task that's coming up that I'm thinking about or worrying about, and then I lose that. And then I have to bring myself back to that focus again. And so I experienced that today, and I'm able to stay focused longer and longer, as I go through this, and enjoy that feeling that comes with that. That was today.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for sharing. And if you're happy, I'd like to talk around that as well, because I think there's a lot in what you're saying and a lot in your experience. So we start to get that sense of parts. I can be in this part that's really still and peaceful and invigorating and energetic. And then there's another part that wants me to pull me out of that goes, oh, no, but I've got lots to get done, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, and I need to do the other. So that's a way that we can actually start to become familiar with, that how we can move between different parts of ourselves. Okay. And if we look at the arc, so if I come back then to the arc of this process, the arc of this frame, we start off by, as I said before, we start off by starting to become really increasingly attuned to ourselves and developing our skill of self-attunement. Then we start to develop and strengthen these two states, which is the zero state and the kindness state. And I will probably organize another class in the future specifically on the kindness state, because there's lots there as well. So then we have these two states. And in the book, I talk about them as being states of being, which is another way of saying of being a part of ourselves. Once we start really being able to connect into them, we start to get the experience of what the nervous system feels like when it's in well-being, when it's not activated, when it's not in survival. Right? Now, where we want to get to towards the end of the process is that becomes our natural state. That's where we are throughout the whole day, throughout most of the day, every day. Now, there are going to be moments where things happen that take us out of that. That's life. But that kind of becomes our default state. David has this lovely phrase, which I thought was really great. He goes, we're going back to our factory settings, right? Because actually we're born in well-being. Our natural state is to be in well-being. It's not to be worried and rushing and perfectionistic and am I better than her? Am I better than him? Am I, can I play guitar faster than somebody else? That's just an example of that. That's not our natural state. That's something that we've learned to do, or our nervous system has learned to do in order to keep us safe, right? So the arc is that as we start to get the experience of our natural state, now this is our central state of being, as I was saying at the beginning, from there we can actually start to look outwards and look at all the activations that are going on a daily basis for us, and start to realize that we have normalized something that's not normal. Right? We start to be able to look at them, and then we start to be able to brain spot them. And that's the part 3 of the book, is the setups, the steps that I give you in order to brain spot all of those different activations. And what we do as we brain spot them is they start to deactivate. The nervous system starts to go, oh, I'm not under threat. oh, I don't need to keep doing that. And the activation comes down, and therefore this state of well-being becomes easier and easier for us just to be there throughout the whole of the day. And then we get to our very last bit of our process, which is the body still reacting in some way just habitually, that still, you know, is a tension or a contraction or that's habitually there, and then we can brain spot that out as well. Okay. But if we get overly focused on the part of the body that's expressing all of this in its dystonia, it's like trying to put a sticking plaster over, you know, a big gaping wound. We're not really going to get very far very fast. What we want to do is heal that wound, and then, you know, and then whatever's left, we can then you know, if there's any little scar left, we can then, you know, work with that in terms of just resolving those last remnants that might be there. Priscilla, lovely to see you again, by the way.
Nice to see you. I actually thought this exercise was going to be easier than it was. What I found is as I got deeper first, I got really sleepy. And then after, I got really fidgety. And then I recognized these as two parts, which I have in like daily life, like being very tired or overworking and overdoing things. So I thought that was interesting, you know, that these came up.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really great feedback. So for some people, and I was one of these people, I have to admit, for some people, there is a lot of activity, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case, Priscilla, I'm just using your wonderful comment as an opportunity to talk around this. There is a lot of activation, which means that we can't actually access very easily the zero state. Sometimes we can't even feel into those parts of our body because they feel too threatening to go there. So that was the case for me too. When I first started, you know, I came across this through my training as a Kundalini yoga teacher, which was kind of my training before, you know, I started. It was one of the trainings I did on my process to when I realized that kind of working just with the mind didn't seem to be getting the results. I said, well, I'm looking for something deeper, and so I started to then learn about the body and the way the body, the wisdom that the body holds, and how we can work through the body. And within that part of my path, I trained as a Kundalini yoga teacher. And this area of the body I discovered through that. At the beginning, I could not connect to it because just whenever I would start to feel into that, it just felt too threatening. How would my body respond? So my focal dystonia was as a musician in the embouchure, so that's the way we form my mouth in order to direct the air through the instrument. But actually, nobody diagnosed that. That term didn't even exist back then. That came on when I was about 17 or 18 years old. And, you know, it was just like, you're not practicing enough, try harder. So that was where I initially would say the focal dystonia was centered. However, the more I started to learn about it and work with this, the more I realized, you know, I had focal dystonia in my foot from a very, very young age. There was an incident, it was very light, but it was there. So there was an incident that happened for me in terms of a quite serious attachment break when I was about 5 years old, or less, 4 or 5 years old. And at that point, I would be walking and my foot would suddenly turn in and turn over, and I would fall over, right? Now, I kind of never really paid much attention to that. And what was interesting was as I deepened into my music, and at that point I was playing a recorder, my recorder became my attachment figure. As that attachment became strong between me and my musical instrument, my foot dystonia disappeared. but I still would I'd still get these kind of spasms in my legs, right? Now, when I first started to connect into the center of gravity part of my body, my legs would go into spasms. So it was very difficult for me at the beginning to do that, right? Kundalini yoga has a very strong trauma base to it in terms of the way it works with the nervous system. And through that, eventually, but it was a very long process that way, the Brainspotting is a much quicker process. Eventually, I could connect to that area of my body, right? So if, and through the therapy that I was doing at that time as well. So if you find that you really can't get there, or it feels really threatening to connect to that physiologically, to that part of your body, or that you just really seem to disconnect or fall asleep or anything goes on, keep going, because it may just resolve itself on its own as you go through the process. But if you get to a point where you go, I've been doing this now for several weeks and I still really can't get it, that's a good sign to reach out and ask for some support, because there's probably quite a strong activation that's going on that's difficult for you to really connect to and resolve on your own. But by having some accompaniment with that, then we can work through that quite easily and in a very gentle way with you. Okay. And then if I come more back directly to what you're saying, Priscilla, what a beautiful description as well of how when we start to center here, we can start to be aware of the activations that are going on for us. And it's a really lovely place to be able to observe them from. Yeah, so thank you for that. Marianne.
Hello. Sorry, I can't put my camera on. I just
Okay,
wanted, thank you. I just want to share that you mentioned that it's hard to do, connect with some parts. So I really find it difficult to connect, and actually felt overwhelming. But what I noticed, that was my left side and left brain that started to thinking about something that you should do to trying to distract me. But as I was going there and as I was talking, I got so overwhelmed and just like, you know, sitting with this feeling, I said, I just can't, I become overwhelmed. I just had to get out. So I think this is something that you talked about. It's hard to connect, or I just really felt like I can't sit with myself. I can't sit with this feeling.
Okay, okay. How are you feeling right now?
I'm okay. I'm feeling like, you know, relieved, or like, you know, feeling better. But in that moment, as I wanted to go down, I'm not sure I was imbalanced at all, because I felt most of my left side and my left brain started to distract me. So it was a good exercise to observe. But I knew it's like, to explain it, I felt some of the block around, like, you know, the sensation around the left brain, just above my ears, like a block. It doesn't allow me to go deeper.
So just that self-awareness in itself, Marianne, is healing.
Okay.
I mean, that's amazing, and that's healing, and that was, you know, absolutely right for you for today. So there really is no hurry with any of this process. I mean, the people who work regularly with me are probably really bored of hearing me saying slower is faster. And so what we want to do is just be attuned with what's going on, and to really be aware. I talk in the book about our window of tolerance. And it sounds like you were very aware of what you could tolerate and what you couldn't tolerate. So this isn't about making ourselves suffer even more. We really want to work very much within our window of tolerance. Okay. At a very practical level, sometimes through the attunement repair exercise, which most people, or my recommendation in the book is you work with that over several weeks before you begin the zero state exercise. And that's because through that exercise, we can start to become aware of areas of our body that feel really safe, grounded, strong, secure, comforting, whatever the word, whatever the you know, the right adjective is for that part of the body. Most of us will have somewhere in the body that feels just more safe or more steady. And so at any time, if we then start to begin to do, for instance, the 0 state, and I go, oh, that feels too overwhelming, you can just move away from there and go to the part of your body that feels really, that feels safer.
Okay.
Okay. And you don't need to come back to the 0 state. You can just have felt into that, become aware of what it felt like, and then come back to safety.
Mm. Yeah,
and then you might want to say, that's enough for today, I'm not going to do any more, and that's perfect. This isn't about pushing through. There's no hurry to get to the end. It's just about being still and present with what is here right now, within the window of tolerance of what I can observe and what I can be present to. And then, you know, another day, if you continue to do that over a period of time, you will find a point where increasingly you can be present. Those sensations feel less and less overwhelming. And then you reach a point where actually you can just drop into the 0 state and it feel a really wonderful place to be. All right. Okay. And, you know, and at any point, if you go, I can't get there on my own because actually it is too overwhelming, just reach out.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that feedback. Anyone else? Michael.
Hi, Ruth. Great to see
Hi,
you.
Great to, likewise. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, and it's great. It's really a great thing that you have here with this group. Hi, everybody. I had a 2-part or maybe 2.5-part question. I'll try to make this as succinct as possible.
Okay.
I still want to have some more time on the 0 state. So I'm probably going to do this for another 15 or 20 days before I go to the kindness state. But once I get well versed into the kindness state, on an ideal day, would it be good if I'm comfortable to be doing all 3 things on a single day, the entombment, the 0 state, and the kindness state? Does that sound right? Or
there's no rules with this. And that's just partly because that's from just a really practical perspective. Okay, we all have different demands on us, different amount of time that we can dedicate to these exercises. So, but what does happen is we become more and more skilled. As we become more and more skilled at them, they become easier and quicker and more kind of accessible to us. Okay, so the attunement exercise is the way that I, you know, when I describe it in the book, and then there's a video on YouTube where I guide you through. I read the instructions of the book and guide you through that. You know, that takes kind of 25 minutes to half an hour or more. But as you get really consolidated at doing that, you probably don't need to go through the whole of that process, you know, step by step. You can probably find, you can actually quite readily just drop into your physical body and be really attuned to the whole of your body. And maybe that only takes you 5 or 10 minutes to do that and to really kind of spend time sitting into that sensation. All right. So once that happens, then it becomes more readily accessible to do more exercises, you know, all the exercises on one day. Likewise, the 0 state gets to a point where you can just really drop into that very easily in just a few minutes. You're right there. Likewise with the kindness state. Then we get to a very interesting place, which is where we can be simultaneously in the 0 state and the kindness state. We move both of them at the same time, and we can even find a brain spot for that. Okay, there is a video somewhere on the YouTube channel where I describe that. Okay, so in terms of can my brain sustain me doing so many exercises, if you're attuned to yourself, you'll know how far you can go on any given day. All right. And for most people, if you do it step by step, you'll get to a point that once you're onto the kindness exercise, you can do all 3 quite comfortably each day, if time permits it.
Right, because actually, yeah, with the zero state, I'm compared to a few weeks ago, I'm able to drop into it pretty quickly, as you said. I feel I didn't know if I was supposed to feel like I was cheating myself by kind of turning my back on the attunement exercise, or if that should really be a regular part of my regimen.
It's really important for it to be a regular part. I mean, I would advise everybody to continue with the attunement exercise daily, if possible. If not daily, if daily is not possible, several times a week. Not only throughout the whole of this process, I continue to do that every day. It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. Is I tune to myself. You know, I just spend a few moments really feeling, you know, how am I today? How does my body feel today? Are there any areas that feel constricted or you know, tight, and just really feel into them and welcome that communication to come through. You know, what's that about? And it doesn't necessarily need to be logical. You just feel into it. I'm present with myself, and I feel into the areas of my body that feel light and joyful and well. And I just I sit with that just for a few minutes before I begin my day, because that's how I know that I'm attuned to myself and I'm connected as I then go out into the day. So, I mean, I would suggest to everybody that just becomes a lifelong habit, and it doesn't need to take, I mean, you know, I probably only spend maybe, you know, 3 minutes in the morning just spending that time with myself.
Great, got it.
Yeah.
Just two quick questions on the kindness
Sure.
state. Once I get to that, is that steadfast what you say in the book about sitting down to do the kindness state? Because with the zero state, you say we can either do it sitting down like we did just 25 minutes ago, or we can do it standing up. Is that steadfast? And also with the bilateral sounds, do you need to have it? Because the zero state, you said it's up to us.
Okay.
Whether we have it on or off.
Yeah. So there are no, I don't like putting steadfast rules in anything, because everybody is completely unique, and we are all a complete, you know, you should think of the number of neuronal connections that we have in our nervous system. You know, each of us are a whole universe, right? Quite literally. So I don't like making steadfast rules. I do give guidance, because I find for most people that's helpful. Okay, so experiment with what works for you with the kindness exercise, whether it's standing up, sitting down, lying down, indoors, outdoors, you know, experiment, and then go with what works best for you. All right. Likewise with the bilateral sounds. For those of you who are musicians, I tend to recommend the nature sounds, just because I know that if I put music on, there's part of my brain that is actually involved with the music, just because, you know, anytime I listen to music, my brain's just like really listening to all the music and the arrangements and everything that's going on there. So that becomes a distraction for me. Okay, so for those of you who are musicians, you may prefer the nature sounds. All right. For those of you who, you know, for the rest of you, you may, you know, you can look on Spotify or YouTube, and there are different, I think somebody put a lovely link onto on our Facebook group, the learning community. Somebody put a great link on there to some bilateral music. David has CDs, David Grand has CDs of his bilateral music as well. So there's plenty of resources with that. You want to put the volume very, very low, because it's actually not the sound of the music that's helping your nervous system. It's the vibration on the little bones in the inner ear, okay, that are creating that effect in your nervous system. All right. And then again, explore and experiment. You know, oftentimes when I brain spot, I don't put the sounds on, not even the nature sounds, because I find that my sensitivity to sound, you know, I've been playing music since I was 3 years old, right? So my sensitivity to sound is so acute that oftentimes any sound that I've got on, even if it's a nature sound, actually distracts me from my process. And that's particularly so at this point in my process where, you know, there's relatively little strong activation in my nervous system because I've done so much brain spotting, right? So, you know, so oftentimes I'll brain spot and I won't put the sounds on, but that's just a personal preference. Explore, try different things out, see what works best for you, and trust your inner wisdom on it. Okay, trust your inner attunement. Thank you. I'm seeing people are answering the question around where to find the bilateral sounds from. The two tracks that I've got are David Grand tracks, the nature sounds. One is called A Step in the River, and the other one is called Oceanic Feelings, I think. So if you check that out online, you'll probably get references to them and where to buy them from.
Ruth?
Yes. Hi, Nolan. Great to see you.
Likewise. I found that when I did recently the attunement exercise, I have like tingling feelings in my forefingers, both hands. I'm a violinist. And my problem is some kind of difficulty setting up my hand so that the half steps and whole steps, the fingers come down in relative good intonation. So this attunement feeling that arose in my fingers, I was kind of struck by that, because there's all kinds of stuff about how the violinist must not clench the neck of the violin too hard between the thumb and the first finger. So I wonder what that might tell me about what's going on. Then with the zero state exercise, when combined with the kindness state exercise, well, like today I could, with the zero state, I could really feel better the outlines of my pelvic bones. I did feel the right side seemed to have a preponderance of kind of preoccupation or discomfort. The mind was taken away in that direction. And when I've tried to add the kindness state to it, my brain spot just yesterday, it was round, and there were like streamers going around and around. And then sometimes that spot will pulsate with my heartbeat, which really shows to me, like what you talk about, the connection between the optic nerve and what's going on in your brain. I'm wondering, any thoughts about this? I've been wondering strongly that I really get a brain spotting therapist.
In terms of the tingling, I think there are lots of different things that can be going on. In my experience, it's a really good sign, because it seems, although there's lots of different things that could be going on, it seems to be what's underlying those is the nervous system reconnecting. So there's often a dissociation, a disconnection with the part of the physical body where we get the dystonic symptoms. It's like somehow it feels smaller or more numb or darker, or doesn't quite feel like it belongs to me. You know, different people have different experiences of that. And what normally seems to come after the tingling is that it feels more connected, and seems to be more evenness between one side of the body and the other. What's also very interesting, I've observed this many times, is the brain will sometimes take that over to the other side of the body in order to do that processing and make the reconnections. So we sometimes get the feelings in both sides of the body at the same time, or sometimes people go, oh, that's really weird, because it's my right index finger where I normally notice the dystonia, but I'm noticing everything going on in my left one right now. So my experience of all of this is just to be with it the way it is, and actually let go of the need to understand what's going on, because I don't think we ever really do understand what's going on. I think the part of the brain that wants to understand or has that need to understand probably isn't very capable, because what's going on is so deep and so, you know, in this really big, powerful part of the brain, it's often very metaphoric, and the, you know, and the logical part of the brain is very linear, and it can't quite really grasp what's going on. So I really loved the way that John described that before, of just going, just being with it, just the way it is, and just trusting in the process. And it's quite surprising sometimes. John also said this as well. It's quite surprising actually when things fall into place. You go, oh, didn't really quite think that it would be that way, or that's taken me by surprise. And those surprises, that uncertainty, which is so much part of this process and so much part of brain spotting, actually starts to become quite a joy. If I come back to the gripping onto the neck of the violin, and that's not just for a violinist, you know, as you know, any, you know, flute, clarinet, any of these instruments, you know, we're also told not to press down too hard on the keys. You know, there's a certain lightness that's required. I think the missing point in terms of musical pedagogy is that's happening at an automated level because the nervous system feels unsafe and it needs to hold on, right? Our most primal reflex is to hold on to our mother's skin or our mother's fur, probably back though in those days. So it's that hyperextension of the fingers and then the hypercontraction to hold back on again. And I know that even though I wouldn't say I never noticed any time to dystonia in my fingers, I think my finger, I noticed that I held tightly onto my musical instrument, and I probably had heavier fingers, would be the way I would talk about it, than, you know, than other people. You know, and what I've noticed is that as I resolved all of that, my nervous system's come into well-being, my fingers on the instrument, they just dance and skip over the keys now. So I think that's, so I think it's just that's just an interesting comment. It doesn't not really necessarily relevant here, but I think it's an interesting comment in terms of often we've been told to hold our instrument lighter, but actually we're not able to, because that's happening at such an autonomic level that's difficult for us to do. And that's often what's underneath a lot of the dystonia that's happening in the fingers as well. I've lost my thread a little bit in the last part that you were talking about, Norland.
Oh, when I do the brain spotting,
yeah,
goes and twirls around and streamers in it. And...
all sorts of things happen when we brain spot. I mean, all sorts of things. I've had so many people tell me so many different things around lights and colors and changes and things swirling and you know, all sorts of things going on. Just stay with it. Just be aware of what's happening and enjoy the ride. And it will be different every time. That's your brain processing. It's just like, wow, isn't my brain amazing? That's what I've learned is the best way of being with that. You know, have that lovely curiosity, childlike curiosity of, ooh, you know, but there's no need to analyze and understand it, because I don't think we ever will. But we can enjoy it. Yeah. Right. Thanks for that, Nolan. Thank you. Tianran, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, great. Well, I can't see you, but great to hear your voice.
Yeah, I'm new to the zero exercise, so I'm still confused about the central space. Is the central gravity in that central space?
The central space runs through where our center of gravity is, right in the center of our pelvic bowl area. Okay.
Okay.
So you might like to think of it like, if you think of a very simple spinning top, you know, which is just an axis and then it has a disc around it. I don't know if you've ever seen those. I mean, we have them here in Spain. They're just a really simple spinning top. It's an axis and a little disc. The disc is the center of gravity. It means that, you know, there's a weight there so that the axis has stability to it. And so when you spin that really fast, the axis actually comes into complete stillness, right? And that can happen because of the weighting of the disc around the spinning, around the top. So you can think of around the axis rather. So you could think of it rather like that the pelvic bowl is like that disc of the spinning top, and then the central space is like that central axis that runs right through it. You know, and it runs right from the base of the body right to the top of the skull and even beyond. You know, I have a sense of it actually going beyond my body, upwards and downwards.
So it sounds like it's more like a line, a straight line, rather than a bended line.
I think that I mean, it comes similar back to John's message. Your spine has a natural curve to it. Okay, yeah. Our spine has a natural curve to it, but this seems to sort of run. I mean, it's not straight as in hard and rigid, but yes, it seems to be kind of almost like. You know, I don't like to get too metaphorical about any of this, but, you know, in Oriental. The Oriental idea of the way the body works in terms of the energy fields, you know, be that through yoga or be it through Oriental medicine, is that there's a sort of an energy line that runs up and down the body through the center of it, where the life force energy runs through the body. It's more like that sense of a straight line that runs up through the body or down through the body, whichever way you want to visualize it from.
Okay, I feel like when I sit straight, I feel the energy better.
Yeah.
But there's a tense in my lower back. Is that okay?
Everybody, we all, certainly at the beginning, we actually, as we start to feel into the zero state, we start to become, most of us become aware of the sorts of tensions that we have, or the feeling of, you know, often maybe we bend over, we curl inwards slightly, or, you know, we become aware of our postural things that are going on. Because something that quite naturally happens once we really connect into the zero state, it's almost like the body on its own starts to become longer and it opens. Okay, without us needing to do anything, it sort of does that quite naturally on its own. But in the meantime, before we get there, we do start to become aware of the tensions that we have, or the strange postures that we have, and that's all part of the activation. Just be aware of it. There's nothing you need to do with it. Just be aware of what's there. Your brain will work it through and release it on its own.
All right. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we're coming to an end now. Thank you so much, all of you, for being, for attending today, for being present with us. Thank you for all the lovely questions and comments and feedback. Jeff, I can just see your hands up.
All right, I was clapping, I thought.
Oh, okay, you're clapping, sorry. I'm not really good on technology. Thank you.
That was an applaud.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. It's been lovely to share this with you all. This is my, really my life's work, from having suffered myself in so many ways. And just to be able to offer and share relief and release to everybody else is an absolute joy for me. So thank you for being here. And I just want for us to come right round, if we start to really drop into this sense of coming back into our central being and allowing all the parts to come back into cohesion. The phrase that I put right at the end of the book, which explains the name of the book, is a Sufi, from a Turkish Sufi, who said, I was looking for, sorry, my mind's gone blank. I was looking for a cure for my trouble, and my trouble became my cure. So we could change the words on that, and we could say, I was looking for a cure for my focal dystonia, and my focal dystonia became my cure. So I encourage you all to really listen to yourselves. Welcome every part of you in, even if it seems to be a part that's a bother or painful or a nuisance. Welcome it all in. It's all your wisdom, and it's showing you where you have become fragmented within yourself. And we heal when we become whole again. And what happens during the process is we realize how much suffering we've been carrying around with us all our lives without even realizing it often. And it was our body, was the part of us that was wise enough to show that to us. And as we come back to wholeness, we go, life is just a completely different place than I could ever imagined it being. And I think just about everybody that I've worked with, as they've come towards the end of their process, as they've come back to, their body working fluidly, have said, I now understand why you talk about focal dystonia in this way. I realize that it is the greatest gift that life has given me. So I hope that that's inspiring for you all to come into healing and wholeness. Please call on me and on any of us if we can support you in any way. All questions and doubts that you have as you go through the process, please do share them in the learning group. So that's on the Facebook. It's called Focal Dystonia Cure Learning Community, if any of you are not on that yet. Please share it there, because it's a way that's very efficient for me to be able to answer your questions. But it also means that most of those questions that you have, there are many other people with the same question. So if you ask it on that group, then we can really support and help more and more people. Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Let's unmute and say goodbye, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.